Have you ever ignored a smoke alarm because you were sure it was just toast? For a few seconds, your brain does something strange. It hears danger, but instead of moving, it negotiates. Maybe it is nothing. Maybe someone else will check. Maybe the sound will stop. Now imagine the alarm has no sound, no smell, no flames in front of you. Just charts, warnings, headlines, and slow changes outside the window. That is the kind of threat our minds are worst at handling. And it helps explain why we deny dangers we cannot easily see. Denial is often treated like a character flaw, as if people who ignore problems are lazy, selfish, or uninformed. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Denial is not just something other people do. It is a normal feature of the human mind. Your brain is constantly filtering reality, deciding what deserves attention and what can be pushed aside. Most of the time, this is useful. If you fully felt every possible danger, every future risk, every bad headline, you would be frozen before breakfast. But that same filtering system can backfire, especially when the danger is big, slow, invisible, complicated, or emotionally overwhelming. Climate change is one of the clearest examples. The science can be measured, the effects can be seen, and the risks are real. Yet many people respond with distance, doubt, numbness, or silence, not always because they know nothing. Sometimes because they know enough to feel threatened, and that feeling is exactly what the mind tries to escape. So the question is not, why are humans so irrational? The better question is, what kind of threat is the human brain designed to notice? And what kind does it quietly ignore? Picture one of your distant ancestors walking through tall grass. A branch snaps nearby. In that moment, the brain does not calculate global trends or long-term probability. It asks a simpler question. Is something about to kill me right now? If the answer might be yes, the body reacts fast. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten, attention narrows. This system is brilliant for snakes, storms, strangers, and sudden cliffs. But it has a weakness. It is tuned for immediate, visible, personal danger. A tiger in the bushes gets your attention. A tiny change in average temperature over decades does not. A flood on your street feels real. A graph predicting future flood risk feels abstract. The human alarm system evolved in a world where danger usually had a face, a sound, a smell, or a shadow. Modern threats often arrive as data. That is why invisible threats create such a psychological gap. We may understand them intellectually, but we do not feel them with the same force. Carbon dioxide has no villainous smell. A warming ocean does not knock on your door. A virus, a pollutant, a financial bubble, or a slow ecological collapse can grow while everyday life looks almost normal. And when life looks normal, the brain makes a quiet assumption. If things were really bad, surely it would feel bad. This is called normalcy bias. It is the tendency to believe the future will resemble the recent past. During disasters, normalcy bias can make people delay evacuation even after clear warnings. They look outside, see familiar streets, familiar furniture, familiar sky, and think, it cannot be that serious. The ordinary present becomes evidence that danger is exaggerated. Climate denial uses the same shortcut, stretched over years. If winter still happens, if some days are cool, if the supermarket still has oranges, the threat feels less urgent. The brain grabs familiar details and uses them to soften the bigger picture. Then there is optimism bias, the belief that bad things are more likely to happen to other people than to us. Most drivers believe they are above average. Many smokers believe they personally will avoid the worst outcomes. People living near risky coastlines may understand sea level rise in general, but still imagine their own home as protected by luck, distance, or time. Optimism bias is comforting. It gives us emotional breathing room. But with environmental threats, it can become a trap. The danger is not denied completely. It is relocated, somewhere else, later, to someone poorer farther away, younger, or less prepared. The problem stays real, but not real enough to change today. Another powerful force is cognitive dissonance. This is the mental discomfort you feel when your beliefs, values, and actions do not line up. Suppose you care about nature, but drive a gas-powered car because you have to get to work. Suppose you worry about climate change, but your job depends on an industry that produces emissions. Suppose you love your children, but the future described by climate scientists makes you feel guilty, helpless, and afraid. That tension hurts, so the mind looks for relief. One option is to change behavior, but behavior can be expensive, inconvenient, or socially risky. Another option is to change the story. Maybe the problem is not that bad. Maybe scientists disagree more than they actually do. Maybe technology will fix everything automatically. Maybe personal choices do not matter, so why think about it? Notice what is happening. Denial is not always a failure to think. Sometimes it is thinking used as a shield. The mind becomes a lawyer defending comfort. This is why facts alone often fail to change minds. If a fact threatens someone's identity, community, job, politics, or sense of being a good person, the brain may treat that fact like an attack. It does not simply ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "What would this mean about me? What would I have to give up?" Psychologists call this motivated reasoning. We are much better at finding flaws in arguments we dislike than in arguments that protect us. Give two people the same evidence, and they may interpret it in opposite ways because their brains are defending different needs. There is also the problem of scale. Human empathy is powerful, but it is not built for huge numbers. One suffering person can move us deeply. 1,000,000 people at risk can become a statistic. This is sometimes called psychic numbing. As numbers rise, feeling does not rise with them. In fact, feeling can flatten. That sounds cold, but it is part of how the mind avoids overload. If you truly felt the full emotional weight of every threatened species, every displaced family, every burned forest, and every future heat death, you might shut down. So the brain compresses the crisis into something distant and blurry. The tragedy becomes too large to hold, so we hold almost none of it. This is why stories matter. A single farmer watching crops fail, a child with asthma during wildfire smoke, a coastal family leaving a house they thought would last generations. These are easier for the brain to process than parts per million or billions of tons. Data tells us the size of the problem. Stories make the problem human. But there is a deeper twist. Sometimes denial is social before it is personal. Imagine sitting at a dinner table where everyone avoids a topic. No one announces a rule. People just steer away. They laugh a little louder. They change the subject. They protect the mood. Societies can do the same thing. If a threat requires large change, then silence becomes a kind of glue. People look around to see what others are worried about. If no one appears alarmed, alarm starts to feel excessive. This is pluralistic ignorance. Many people privately sense a problem, but each assumes others are unconcerned, so everyone stays quiet. With climate change, this can create a strange public calm. People may be worried privately, but they do not bring it up because they do not want to seem dramatic, political, negative, or naive. And denial is easier when responsibility feels spread out. If I drop a glass, I know who caused the mess. If billions of people, companies, governments, and systems contribute to emissions over generations, responsibility becomes foggy. When everyone is involved, each individual can feel strangely uninvolved. This is diffusion of responsibility. It is the same reason people may fail to help in a crowd. Each person assumes someone else will act. So denial is not one thing, it is a stack of mental shortcuts. Normalcy bias says, today looks fine. Optimism bias says, it will not hit me. Cognitive dissonance says, accepting this would hurt. Motivated reasoning says, let me find a reason not to accept it. Psychic numbing says, this is too big to feel. Social silence says, Maybe I should not bring it up. Diffusion of responsibility says, surely someone else is handling it. Put all of these together, and you get a mind that can live beside danger without fully responding to it. But here is the surprising part. Denial is not defeated by panic. Panic burns hot and fast. It can make people look away even harder. The opposite of denial is not constant fear. The opposite is usable reality. Usable reality means making a threat concrete enough to understand, close enough to care about, and practical enough to act on. A smoke alarm works because it gives a clear signal and a clear next step. Leave the building. Call for help. Check the stove. Environmental threats need the same psychological translation. Not just, the planet is in danger, but your city will face more heat days. Your school can plant shade trees. Your community can prepare cooling centers. Your vote, job, diet, energy use, and conversations connect to systems larger than yourself. This does not mean every burden belongs to the individual. In fact, one reason denial grows is that people are handed enormous problems with tiny instructions. Recycle this bottle, then worry about the atmosphere. That mismatch can feel absurd. Real action has to include policies, technology, infrastructure, businesses, and communities. But personal action still matters because it changes what feels normal. And what feels normal shapes what becomes politically and socially possible. The goal is not to feel guilty every minute. Guilt is poor fuel. The goal is to stay awake without becoming overwhelmed. To notice when your brain says, it is probably fine, and ask, is that evidence or comfort? To notice when a problem feels too big and ask, what is the next honest action? To talk about invisible threats often enough that they become socially visible. Because denial thrives in vagueness. It shrinks when the unseen becomes specific. The psychology of denial shows us something humbling. Humans are not built to respond perfectly to slow invisible danger, but we are built to learn. We can design better alarms. We can tell better stories. We can create habits, communities, and systems that help our ancient brains face modern risks. So the next time you hear a warning that feels distant, pause before dismissing it. Maybe your brain is protecting you from fear, or maybe it is protecting you from the very information that could help you act in time. If this changed how you think about denial, climate, and the threats we cannot easily see, subscribe. We break down one mind-blowing topic every week.